He called me about 6 months later and said they had found her, and it appears she'd frozen to death, um, trying to cut from one neighborhood to the other, and had just sat down next to a tree, went to sleep.
The podcast has turned from a health and detox podcast to an Unsolved Mysteries podcast. What's up, my friends? Welcome back to another episode. My name is Mike Perrine. This is the Everyday Detox podcast. And if you're watching this on YouTube, yes, I am wearing another James Rizzi original t-shirt. For those of you that have visited the New York studio, you know that James Rizzi is a dear friend of mine. I've known him since high school, and he designed a lot of the murals on the walls of Vitality NYC, my studio that I had pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, and is now Alivio Wellness, as Adriana, my business partner, has taken over and rebranded it. But he did a lot of the murals on the walls, and I love his t-shirts, and he gifted me with another one, and I'm wearing it right now. You can check him out down in the show notes or in the description. So in this episode, I sit down with Sam Shepard, once again, the developer of Vasta astaxanthin, a product that you have heard me talk about in the intros to these podcasts for many years now. And I make Instagram videos and reels about them. And it's something that I continue to take consistently. It's an extremely potent antioxidant. If you want to support this podcast, jump down into the show notes of the description. And there is a link there where you can get astaxanthin and a discount. So I sit down with Sam in this podcast to address some of the questions that have come up over the years from people that have heard the previous podcast with Sam and I, or that have heard me talk about it on Instagram. And one of the questions that we go through, that we get into, is the ideas that Sam has about fruit and fructose, because a lot of people that would sort of get on to astaxanthin and start watching Sam's videos and they go, wow, this guy's brilliant, this is great. Hold on, Mike, wait a second. Isn't fruit like a fundamental food in the cleansing life? Isn't it like a highly cleansing food and a nutritious food? Yet Sam says if we eat fruit, we're creating inflammation and detracting from our health. Sam holds the idea that fructose, of course, in the form of high fructose corn syrup in those places where we know it's inflammatory and we know it takes our body for a ride, but also even in the form of fruit, particularly because the fruit these days that most of us are eating don't appear in nature and they've been hybridized to be bigger and sweeter, which is true. He strongly feels that we should remove fruit from our diet. So Sam and I get into it and we discuss it, and he's brilliant. He's got a lot of great ideas on that. I see where his thought process is going. I think you'll find it very interesting. So anyway, one last announcement. The Academy is moving over into a new platform, a community platform named School. And what this is going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us to offer the master classes, which in the past have been very expensive, and rightfully so, because they're extremely valuable, at a more affordable and accessible price once you are a member of the community. But we're not just creating the community for access to the master classes. What we're actually going to do is we're going to interact in the community with live Zoom calls where myself, Gil Jacobs, will take specific sections of the courses. And we're going to do Zoom calls, which will be accessible to everybody in the community that you can join in on or watch the replay on. And we're going to do private Q&As for everyone. So that's going to be a much, much needed and added benefit to the Academy. And also, I'm going to do some bonuses every month where I'll be taking people through different meals I'm preparing. So you can join in and you can learn that way just by being a part of the community. So drop down into the show notes or the description and check that out. And anyway, I hope you guys really enjoy this episode. It's a long one. Sam and I go through a lot of questions. We get deep on it. If you're a member from the previous podcast, and if you haven't listened to it yet, definitely go check that one out. Sam has a very calculated, scientific mind, and he shares a lot with us. It was definitely educational, and I'm so appreciative that he was willing to sit down with me again. Hope you guys enjoy it. Real quick before we jump in, I just finished the final edit and I cut out a section where Sam and I were discussing his experience with COVID using Vasta and some information that his cardiologist friends shared with him. I didn't want to attract the wrong attention from the platforms. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to release it in the Academy. So if you're interested in hearing that section, drop down into the show notes of the description, click the link, join us in the Academy. I'm going to be releasing that section there. Anyway, let's jump on in. Hope you love this one. Sam, thanks so much for coming on the podcast again today. I really appreciate it. The last episode we did was really popular. I talked to so many people about Vasta that I should probably come apply for a job with you guys.
The way it's going, we're going to need more employees for sure.
I'm just going to remind the listeners that, you know, if you wanted to know more about Sam's story and how why he developed this product, his story of healing, and all the details of that, we covered that in episode number 41. So definitely go. We did a deep dive on all of that. So definitely go listen. We also covered what makes Vasta different than other astaxanthin products, because that's one of the most popular questions that I get. So if anybody has not heard that episode, definitely go and check that out. And Sam, remind me, how long ago was it though that you started the company? And just how long ago was it that you had cancer and had to start troubleshooting it? What's the time frame on leading up to today?
Yeah, I 2003 was diagnosed with cancer. Taking the Valasta, my cancer disappeared. I didn't have any more symptoms of my cancer in 2007. And then it took me from 2007 to 2015 to sort of figure out why in the world did it work and why was it working on family members and friends that I was giving it to during that 8-year period. And in 2015, sort of figured it out. I knew biochemically why it was working. And we began, I've done 8 companies in my life. This was the only one that I didn't do a business plan for. It just, it was just organic. It just sort of happened from the testimonials of the people seeing the same results that I saw. And that's what really got my attention. Was it wasn't just me. This was happening to everybody we gave this to. So in 2015, I had still had access to ProQuest, which was a government database. I began to see if the government knew about this astaxanthin. And I had 57 research papers that I downloaded from the government database. It wasn't available to the public. And I was shocked. And my shock was they were developing cancer cell lines by causing an inflammatory response using hydrogen peroxide and things that were causing free radicals to attack normal cells that they had in petri dishes. And they would have 1 million cells in these petri dishes, and 2 out of 1 million would all of a sudden become cancerous, and they could establish cancer lines. So I reverse engineered it. I said, okay, what mechanism in the body, if it takes these free radicals to convert normal cells into cancer cells, why isn't that same biochemistry working in the human body? So part of the research was finding all that out. Now that's a detail that it took a long time to figure out. So when I found these 4 free radicals, and I knew that that's how normal cells get converted into cancer cells, was these 4 free radicals. And I now knew that they were short an electron. That's the definition chemically of a free radical. They have an unpaired electron in their outermost orbital. And that the astaxanthin could donate or react and neutralize that reactivity of that outer orbital. That's when it clicked. That's when the light bulb went off. Was, oh my golly, this material, like glutathione, will donate an electron, neutralize the free radical. Now the free radical is converted into water or oxygen, depending on what free radical it was. It was no longer reactive into and disrupting the DNA of normal cells. That was the game changer. And with cancer. That happened in 2015, and I wanted all of the papers published, made public.
Why were they hidden from the public, or were they just something that was like sort of buried in a place where you would nobody would be able to see it? Like there was no means to publish them.
Yeah, they were held in a government database that the public didn't have access to. The government did. DARPA did, the DoD, all the departments of the government had access to it. But it wasn't a database that was available for the general public.
Is that the case now?
They're not now. In 2015,
So are they still hidden
I
now?
contacted the CDC in Atlanta, told them that I had these papers and that they had 2 weeks to publish them, or I was going to publish them.
Now, is that illegal?
I was informed that did a lot of work for the federal government. It would not be in my best interest to publish those papers. And I contacted two of the developers. One worked for Merck and the other one worked for Pfizer, I believe. Two researchers who actually used astaxanthin to develop two cancer drugs called Keytruda and Opdivo. You've probably heard of those. Those two cancer drugs were developed from astaxanthin. I asked them if they were working on astaxanthin at the pharmaceutical companies, and the response was no. They don't work on natural supplements. Their job is to develop synthetic molecules, and we all know why, so they can patent it and charge $40,000 a dose. What I did is I told them that in 2 weeks I was going to publish these papers.
That's pretty bold.
And the only thing they said to me was it would not be in my best interest. When I hung up the phone, my heart was truly beating. I really knew, where this was coming. It now was a pinch point. And let's see who blinks first. So I kept watching over the next several months, and I began to see these papers start to show up on public searches. And now everybody can go on and Google astaxanthin and NIH and whatever disease you want to do. And those papers are now available to the public. And that really opened it up. That started in 2015. And all of these papers now began to become available, thousands of peer-reviewed papers. And then we were having such success, we formed Vasta in November of 2018. And we began to just, whoever called in and wanted it, they had heard from a family member, their disease went away, and it was only by word of mouth and this social media stuff, which when I went to college, it was all advertising and billboards, and you go out as a salesman, make cold calls and do all that. This whole social media stuff changed marketing tremendously.
I mean, just the videos that I made about Vasta, I mean, they're probably some of the most viral videos I've ever made. And I mean, we're talking millions of views, and that's a big deal for my platform, like to have millions of views on videos.
It was shocking to me, to be honest with you. And now, we're now producing the product in 2018. And, I'm driving one chocolate bar down to the post office, and then I get an order for 4 chocolate bars, and all of a sudden it just took off, and we had to figure out very quickly how we were going to take it from that point to where it is now. In 2019, I was invited to Washington to testify on the research that I had, and there were probably 200 people. It was through Rotary, and they had about 200 people there. There were some legislators, senators, a staff from Ben Carson's department was there. All the 5 major hospitals were there. There was a director of oncology from Johns Hopkins, Sloan Kettering, MD Anderson, Mayo, and the Cleveland Clinic. And they were very skeptical. One guy even made a comment that he had no interest in coming to listen to me talk because he had heard a lot of snake oil salesmen in his life.
We've been called that a lot from the videos I've made, by the way. That's a common comment that I see on the videos, and then there's also a lot of positive comments, but that's a common thread.
And that's why we didn't treat it as a normal business. I didn't go out and market it and sell it. I just when somebody needed it, we would provide it to them. And then when they would get healed, all of a sudden they would tell 100 other people.
Now you've seen a lot of data. I mean, I'm sure you're collecting your own data now, like not just your personal experience, but you don't only just sell a product to people, but you actually, um, you do all sorts of work with your customers, and you get a lot of feedback from people. What what's the overall general success rate that you see?
Yeah, it's. Uh, I sort of have to preface that question with nobody's getting out of here alive. So there's a time component, um, but we've had several, probably hundreds of people who were stage four. These people had 2 to 4 months, 3 to 6 months, less than a year to live, and they're still alive today after 5 years, 6 years. And there's no trace of cancer. Um, an interesting one just happened this past week. An internationally known doctor, and I'm not going to mention his name because I don't have permission, but he's a top-ranked cardiologist. His brother had severe cancer, was put in a hospital in Chicago, was losing weight, got down to about 118, 120 pounds. He weighed about 200 pounds. So it gives you some idea of the state that he was in. And the doctor said at most he had 7 days left. So last Tuesday, we put him on Vasta, pretty heavy dose. His brother, who's this cardiologist,
What's a heavy dose, Sam? In a condition like this, what's a heavy dose?
for his body weight, we put him on 300 milligrams a day.
And what does that look like in regards to capsules or something? Just so people that are using it currently could, not that they're going to mimic this protocol, but just so they understand what we're talking about.
Yeah, the pre-filled capsules, that's 10 capsules a day for a man that weighs 120 pounds.
10 capsules is 300.
2 days later, his strength came back, his appetite came back. He began eating. His bowels began to move again. And on Thursday of last week, they released him from the hospital, and he's at home now. Um, doctor, the doctor was shocked, but the doctor himself had been taking Vasta for a pretty severe case of 42 years of psoriatic arthritis. And in 7 days,
Oh, I know who you're talking about because we started the last podcast with this person. Yes.
that is probably one of the most dramatic turnarounds. Um, and I talked to him last Saturday, and he's home, he's eating, he's gaining weight. It's just shocking uh, what the effects of this are. Um, we This protocol is really a key to a major lock where there needs to be a lot of research done, more than I'm capable of doing. This is for real. We now know how to not only measure your inflammatory disease state, but how to mitigate it, get it under control. Because up to this point, we didn't have any way to stop our progression into an inflammatory disease state. Now we do.
Do you see other contributing variables with people's lifestyle? Do you see certain people, they have maybe two or three other methods of self-care going on versus people that have just gotten themselves into a disease state because they've thought nothing about their body and maybe they have a very toxic chemistry? Or do you see it work equally in both a, quote unquote healthy person and a very maybe toxic diseased person?
Yeah, I come at it a little differently. A lot of the folks up to this point, and I was probably involved in it early on in my life. It's like trial and error. I heard about this. Let's try it. Let's see if it works. And when I got sick, my discipline state was no, no, no. We're going to start at the fundamental foundation and move up. and make sure nothing falls through the cracks. Don't start at the top with all these variables, different supplements, different things, and let's see where it's sort of like the ball falling down, the ding, 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 ding. There's only out of 1,000 spots for the ball to land, only one is going to stop your cancer. But we'll introduce several balls at the top. 90% of them aren't going to be effective towards a cancer. It's like a trial and error game, a statistical game. I went at it very differently. I went at it from a non-random, sort of a disciplined chemical approach. So I understood the pathway. Okay, if this, then this. And I moved up the tree to finally find exactly how cancer, and that's why those papers in 2015 were so important, because I reverse engineered it. They were giving these cells free radicals to create a few cancer cells. Okay, if that's the case, what in the human body would mimic those? How does a normal cell become a cancer cell? Well, it's these free radicals. Where do these free radicals come from? So I went at it from that point of view. And that point of view, and a lot of the training that I had in engineering and in chemistry and physics, you've got to be very disciplined and stay on track. And there's no hit or miss. I'm going to take 500 milligrams of vitamin C and see if there's an effect. Well, there might be a positive effect, might be a negative effect. You're just looking for change, and hopefully it moves in the right direction, and that becomes your gospel. I can't do that. I had a very difficult time with that. And so I had to know why from the science. Why was this working? And that's how I came up with the 4 free radicals. These 4 free radicals were capable of producing all these diseases.
So you're saying this works the same in the 31-year-old triathlete guy that happens to get a diagnosis and the overweight pre-diabetic 57-year-old guy with constipation issues. It works in them both equally.
It does. It sure does. There may be some, for example, in the younger guy, what we're working on right now is another program with children's diseases, because glutathione is a intracellular antioxidant. It's very important. So when the mitochondria consumes sugar, it produces these hydroxyl free radicals. Well, these hydroxyl free radicals in a normal human are neutralized by the glutathione and the superoxide dismutase. Those are the 2 cellular antioxidants that we naturally have. So when we're young, we can do a lot of stupid things. We can eat a lot of sugar. I could drink a lot of alcohol. I could eat a lot of pizza. I could stay up late chasing women. There are a lot of things I could do early on in my life that created stress and these free radicals. But I was producing a lot of glutathione. And so you don't see a lot of cancer in 20-year-olds. They're the tip of the normal distribution. But when we look at children that are getting these cancers, we find that they are genetically not producing glutathione. There's a genetic glitch. Now we can measure it. Every child should have their HSCRP run and, if possible, measure their glutathione concentration in their blood. Because children from 2 years old up, if they are producing glutathione at the cellular level, they should not get these childhood terrible, terrible diseases.
Sam, do you have places that you recommend to get these tests? Because there's a lot of places online, but like, where would somebody have their child's glutathione tested? Aside from going to like your doctor and asking them to run tests, are there places where people can just override the whole medical system, get their own testing done that you know of?
There's several of those labs. We're hooked up with a lab on the website. It doesn't economically advantage us at all, but we want to know from a service perspective, what is your inflammatory disease state? Because that's important for us to figure out the dosing.
I have a question here. My wife wanted to know, actually. She wanted to know what was one of the most surprising conditions that Vasta healed? Because, first you discovered it with your case, and then you started recommending it to friends and family, and now you have all this data from customers. But just, I know that it works not only on cancer, but what's like one of the most surprising, or a couple of the most surprising things that it had a positive effect on?
We had a 39-year-old beautiful woman in Texas, had a spot come up underneath her bra strap, and for a year she just thought it was where her bra rubbed, and it was an abrasive spot. Finally, it had enlarged, and she went into the doctor, and he looked at it, threw his hands in the air, and said, "Oh my golly, it's melanoma." And he said, "You've had this for a year." He said, "We're going to have to go up and do a PET scan." Did a PET scan. Here she had 2 tumors in her brain, I think 7 tumors in her colon. And they told her that she probably had at most 4 months. And one of our friends contacted me, and this was early on. I hadn't given it to a lot of people at that point. So we hit her with a pretty hard dose. We've been as high as 3,000 milligrams per day without any side effects.
So wait, 3,000 would be 10 times 10 capsules or something, like 100 capsules a day?
Pretty much, but it was in liquid. And the person we gave that to was in the second month of a stage 4, 4 month prognosis. She only had 4 months to live, and she lived for an additional 8 years and cancer free. Yeah,
And then but she died 8 years later?
yeah. She died 8 years later, and the best we can figure is that they found her in the woods, leaning up against a tree, and they couldn't figure out. She died of exposure.
Oh, so this had nothing to do with her cancer. She just happened to.
No, no, it had to do with some sort of, I don't know. She got in an argument and walked out in freezing weather.
Oh, the poor woman.
That I actually had the FBI agent when she turned up missing. The investigator, forensic investigator, called me and said, "Do you know Lori?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I know her." I said, "She was taking one of our products." I said, "What's this about?" He said, "Well, she's been reported missing now for a couple months. We can't locate her." And I'm going, "Oh my golly!" He said, "How?" He asked me the questions about how I knew her and all that, and I told her that we were treating her for cancer. And he said, "Yeah." He said she was cancer free, and that's not what we think is the issue here. And they thought there was some foul play or something. Well, it was about 6 months later. I get a phone call, and the way he found my number was in her phone. She had left her phone or alongside the road or something, but they had her phone, and my number was in her contact list. And he called me about 6 months later and said they had found her, and it appears she'd frozen to death, um, trying to cut from one neighborhood to the other, and had just sat down next to a tree, went to sleep.
This is such an unusual story, Sam. The podcast has turned from a health and detox podcast to an Unsolved Mysteries podcast. But just cutting from one neighborhood to the next, in my mind, I thought, oh no, she was hiking somewhere and got lost or dehydrated or something, and then couldn't make it or had an electrolyte imbalance. But no, she was just cutting through the woods. That makes it even more unusual.
They couldn't find any foul play, nothing. She just sat down, and no gunshot, nothing, I guess.
Okay then.
Let's get back on track here. That's one for the novel. Somebody could write a book on that one. But this young lady, the 39-year-old, um, she was my very first case with melanoma, and um, the doctor was shocked. MD Anderson was who was treating her, and she was on it for 42 days. And the lesion on her side healed over. That's how she knew that something was going on. And her her bowels began to operate more freely.
That's an interesting side effect, Sam. I'm a colonic therapist. That's what I do primarily for the past 23 years. And you know, I didn't have any clients locally at my small studio in the smaller town I live in doing it. But back in New York with my colleagues there, I took taken a trip to New York and I was with my teacher, Gil Jacobs, and he said, "Have you heard of this astaxanthin stuff? You know, do you know what this is?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." He goes, "Oh, it mobilizes waste like nobody's business." And it wasn't until a month or two later when some of my local clients started using it that I noticed that it helps loosen waste and get people going to the bathroom, but not like a laxative. It's really interesting. And I don't quite understand the mechanism of what's going on aside from maybe inflammation reduction. Do you have any ideas on that?
Yeah. There's a couple issues. Uh, my first real inkling as to what was going on was a little boy by the name of Jackson in Mississippi again. He was diagnosed with failure to thrive, and he could not get any nutrition out of any meal that he would eat. He was eating dirt, he was eating grass, he was eating whatever paper, bark, whatever he could get his hands on. He's in a constant state of starvation. He was only 3 years old, I think. And the doctors told him that he was going to have to go on IV feeding, and this his life expectancy wasn't expected to be long. And I was contacted to see what was going on, and I'd never seen a case like that before. And I said, if nothing, sugar should be able to be ingested pretty quickly. And I said he should have the chocolate. Just feed him the chocolate. Well, they began to feed him the chocolate, and his appetite came back. He began to eat meals, and then he got down from eating 6 meals a day to eating 3 meals a day. And now he's growing. He's alive and well. And when I began to look at it, the cilia in the small bowel, there's little tiny little cilia like this that are sorting through all of the nutrients, and we would absorb with the surface area all the nutrients as the food moves through our gut. His had retracted. He had such intestinal inflammation that the swelling had offset and the cilia were no longer present on the lining of his intestines.
Small surface area, just the tips, huh? Because they were so probably swollen together. Got it.
Just just pulled back, just like a turtle's head. And he could not get nutrition. So when he began to take the Vasta, the inflammation went away and these protrusions began to come out. And all of a sudden now his cilia is normal, but it was inflammatory in the gut. And we see it with IBC, we see it with um, um, irritable bowel with diarrhea, we see it with irritable bowel with constipation. It's all inflammation. And and that's why you end up with these cilia moving your food through all the digestate through your gut, and you're now absorbing it. So your appetite goes down. You don't have to eat as many meals. Your sugar levels stabilize, all because of what's going on in that small bowel. And it made a huge difference because when I got cancer, I had irritable bowel problems, terrible. That's when I should have known that something was not right. After I got on Valasta, it completely cleared up. Within 2 or 3 weeks, I noticed a difference, and ever since then, it's just I never thought I'd have a podcast where I'm talking about having bowel movements, but
This is the one where we do that. You should, I know you haven't listened to my previous podcast, but you would be surprised at the conversations that we have and the topics we cover.
seems like we always end up down in that area of of the body, but it's a very important part of the body. And when you look at the microbiome and what nutrients we actually get from parasitic biological matter that lives in our guts, it's pretty important. Um, so that was another one that was pretty amazing to me. And now his growth is stunted, but he's now normal. He's now eating meals. That's how severe inflammation can affect you, and it masks itself. It presents differently in different people.
Speaking of children, so my wife wanted me to ask this one as well. Um, we have a 4-year-old son. I have quite an interesting family. I have a 33-year-old son, a 4-year-old son, and a 1-year-old daughter. And my 4-year-old son, he has eczema. Can get it on his mouth, can get it on his chest, on his belly. And I was quite surprised by this because his diet is so clean. His parents were healthy. We don't have chemicals we don't have hygiene products and chemicals around our house and things like that. His elimination is stellar. All the things that I would normally do to work with someone in my practice to eliminate skin issues. He doesn't have any of those issues, yet he has them. Sometimes he's sensitive to particularly nuts, like sometimes almonds and things can cause a flare up in him. And I used to actually give him some astaxanthin, but not consistently. He was kind of into it. He kind of thought it was fun because I'd be taking it and I would just shoot it right in my mouth, and he'd want a shot too. But then he started, I guess the taste started getting to him because I wasn't giving it to him in chocolate. And he started saying this to me. He started saying, I'd say, hey, come here, I want to give you a shot. And he'd go, no rat medicine. And my wife and I were like, rat medicine? What is he talking about? Rat medicine? He's like, no rat medicine. So, and my wife figured it out. She said, she says, he's seen that video that you made on Instagram where you talk about, the naked mole rat. And so he's calling it rat medicine. And I was like, he's so smart. He's putting these things together. So I'm going to have to give him some chocolate or something to get it in there. But can you tell me a little bit about, and this is more of a personal thing that I'm inserting into this podcast, but why not? It's my podcast. Can you tell me a little bit about dosage for a 4-year-old?
We've been as high as 100 milligrams, depending on what the disease is. But a 4-year-old can get by with 25 to 50 milligrams a day. Now, first of all, if his diet is clean, the one thing that we're finding is causing a lot of the skin rash issues is fruit juices. No more fruit.
He eats a lot of fruit. So okay, so let's go into this here. So 25 to 50 milligrams a day is good for a 4-year-old. This is one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about because, I introduced you a lot to the nutritional detox community, and people started messaging me, and they were like, Sam is really not. He talks about the dangers of consuming fructose, even in the form of fruit, and that could make up 60 to 80% of the calories for some of these people, and some people in the fruitarian community, it's like 100% of their calories. But here's the thing, though, that's very confusing. Like even in my diet is probably about 60 to 70% fruit and fruit sugar. Same with Dr. Bishy, who was our introduction, Dr. Fred Bishy. And when I look at it in my personal life, and when I look at it in my clientele and Dr. Bishy's clientele and all my colleagues, and when I look at it in the fruitarian communities that I'm just sort of witnessing from Instagram and stuff like that, we see a healthy body weight. We see them being endurance athletes, yoga people, clear skin. They generally don't have inflammatory issues. So so I'm kind of confused as to where that comes from. And I have some ideas on it that I want to.
Fred and I have gone back and forth on this, but keep in mind, the way Fred gets around it is Fred compensates the fruit that he's eating with a huge ingestion of carotenoids from his vegetables. His vegetable intake is very, very high. So um, it, people eat fruit for no other reason than that's where we get our desire for sweetness from. I don't see people that don't eat fruit. Nobody gets scurvy anymore. Nobody really has a vitamin C deficiency anymore. Um, we get enough fruit or vitamin C probably through the vegetables, the colored vegetables that we eat. So the only reason we eat fruit is for its apparent fiber content and also for the sweetness desire. Fructose cannot be used by any cell in the body, and by definition, that makes it a poison. Glucose, on the other hand, is used by every cell in the body. Triglycerides come from fructose. When the fructose is metabolized, it's converted into what's called tags. Uh, um, Triglycerides is what we call them. Once the triglyceride levels get to a certain point, the liver converts them into LDL cholesterol. That's where cholesterol usually comes from, is from fruit, high ingestion of fructose. Not animal fats, nothing like that, not oils. It comes from the metabolism, the biochemistry of the conversion pathway of fructose to LDL cholesterol. But if you're offsetting the inflammatory portion of that with high vegetable intake or high antioxidant intake, you can offset that. The same as glutathione offsets it. But I love the desire for sweet things. I just have to watch my HSCRP and keep it below 3. So if I desire something sweet, I've got to keep in mind that I can't let my CRP get above 3 milligrams per liter. So I know how to get it below that, the same as Fred knows his diet. And he's very, very good at it, Michael. He's just a phenomenal human being. But he's allowed to enjoy his life and eat something sweet.
Well, let me ask you this because I'd be curious to have my levels read as well because what we find in working with people that are starting out with a toxic chemistry, like the 55-year-old that's never worked out before, they have excess weight on their body, they're constipated, they're pre-diabetic, they might have they have all sorts of conditions, right? They don't have good circulation. When that person starts to change their diet and lifestyle, especially in a sluggish, constipated, congested system, if they put fruit sugar in there, it ferments usually into alcohol and gas in the intestines, and it creates a lot of poison just from being in that environment. And then we find at a certain point, if people really stick with it, as weight comes off, as the elimination increases, as the microbiome changes, that they use those, that they're able to process that a lot more effectively, and it doesn't have the side effect of creating sort of an auto intoxication, if you will. Do you think that the body type of the person putting the fruit in matters in this case? Do you think it would still, like, I'm wondering where the inflammation is in my body, and how come I seem to just be vibing really high off of eating fruit sugar. And I don't eat excess fruit sugar. And yes, I do what Fred does. I eat big rug salads and carrots and beets and greens. I eat a lot of that throughout the day, but half of my day is probably fruit.
If you look at what the fruits and vegetables looked like 100 years ago, what did corn look like? It's nothing as to what it looks now. We've hybridized everything. Now, when I calculated, for example, in an apple, all the antioxidants in the apple are in the skin and in the seeds. So, at what point the antioxidants in the skin and the seeds would be enough to offset the inflammation caused by the fruit of the apple if you ate it? What size apple would perfectly neutralize, from if you ate the skin and the seeds, the inflammatory response by eating the fruit? And it turns out the apple is about 1 inch in diameter. That's as big an apple as you should eat, because the surface area, being very, very thin skin, contains 538 times more antioxidants than the fruit does. So so that's the biggest. It should be a crab apple, not a big Fuji apple.
It's almost like a cherry, it has a sweet thing, but the skin is loaded with the deep, rich pigment on the outside, maybe more in balance, depending on how sweet the cherry is, maybe more in balance to the piece of fruit that you're consuming versus a big apple with big, yeah.
That surface area to volume ratio is crucial. So what do we do? People that grow apples want you to eat more apples. How do we get people to eat more apples? You make it sweet. You increase the fructose content of the apple, they sell more apples. Same thing happened with Gatorade. Gatorade, when it was developed in Florida, was a terrible drink, extremely salty, and the football players hated it. So the football coach decided he would sell it to Pepsi Cola, and Pepsi Cola ends up buying Gatorade. Well, Pepsi Cola knew a secret. The secret was fructose offsets salt flavor in the mouth. So they knew that they could now, with those electrolytes and everything that got pumped up because they won the world championship, it was a big marketing play. So they added high fructose corn syrup to Gatorade. They hid the salt content by the fructose sweetness, and now Gatorade is all over, and it's one of the worst drinks you could eat. You could drink.
Well, that's a concentrated form of fructose just mainlining into somebody's body, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, fructose was introduced into our food supply in 1966. And epidemiologically, when I went back, because up until 1966, our cancer rate was one death out of every 50. After 1966, our cancer rate is 1 in 3. And 1966 is a marked year. So when I go back and I looked at 1966, I find that that's when Lyndon Johnson introduced high fructose corn syrup into our food supply. That's the poison in our food supply. And he did it for a reason. He needed money to fight the Vietnam War, and he was going to take it from the corn subsidy. And the USDA, the same happens with ethanol with gasoline now. So the USDA petitioned Johnson and says, we'll give up the subsidy, but you have to allow high fructose corn syrup into the food supply. And he did. Now we have cancer as one death out of every 3. Prior to 1966, it was 1 in 50. With all the smokers, with all of the hardship of life prior to 1966, now we have a cancer problem where smoking is no longer a primary activity. It's high fructose. It's fructose. That's the molecule that does it. I don't care where it comes from.
See, I understand it in regards to the concentrated fructose and the industrialization of it, but I'm just I'm just looking for it in my clientele. I'm looking for it in my own life, and I'm going, I don't see the inflammation or the disease markers in the people eating fruit.
Why would it be different? Why would the fructose molecule be different in fruit than it is in high fructose corn syrup?
Well, I guess if someone's eating exclusive hybridized fruits, they're just getting tons and tons of fruit sugar, fruit sugar, fruit sugar. But I don't see it in people that do, eat other foods, but they have a meal of fresh fruits every day. That's why I'm just trying to understand like I don't see the danger of it. I see more of the value of the antioxidants and the fiber, and of course the pleasure of eating some fruit. Um,
Fred Beach is too, but the reason is because you're offsetting it with a vegetable diet. Someone who's eating meat and potatoes and fruit is in trouble.
that I understand now what your recommendation is based on that, because in those types of bodies paired with those diets, particularly if the fruit's not eaten on an empty stomach, like it is going to cause issues. And we see that all the time. My teacher, Gil Jacobs, who's a colonic therapist, he talks about, he says, what happens, he goes, every summer, some well-meaning person has a barbecue. Everyone's eating the ribs and the shrimp on the Barbie and all this stuff. And he goes, and then the well-meaning host brings out watermelon. He goes, she would be much better off bringing out oatmeal cookies, even though it's not a quote unquote natural food, because that fruit sugar is going to it's going to have a lot of trouble through that digestive system and cause problems.
Yeah, I set the limit. I get asked this question, and I usually take a pretty radical approach on it. But let's talk about the moderation of it. Fruit levels that are 4.8 grams per 100 grams of fruit, anything above that should be avoided. That keeps your HSCRP and your inflammatory disease state in check. But people who are diseased, the first thing I recommend for them to do is to take the fruit out of their diet, eliminate it as a source of free radical generation. But in a normal diet, if you're keeping your C-reactive protein and you're staying at a highly alkaline or antioxidant level, 4.8 grams per 100 grams of fruit is pretty good. That includes a banana, blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, but no oranges, no peaches, no plums, no cherries. Um, they all exceed that level, and you can Google it and find it. I think the NIH has it published now, where you can see high fructose fruits, and fruit juices are loaded um, simply because they're supplemented with usually an external source of sugar, whether it's high fructose corn syrup or just another form of sugar.
I was just going to say this makes sense because we're talking about things out of balance. I mean, like even with animal protein, I mean, one of the big challenges, especially from a colonic therapy perspective, is that animal protein needs the balance of fibers and vegetables to help it move through the body. I mean, if people just ate exclusive dairy and meats all the time, some people are doing that these days. It's called the carnivore diet, and we see completely impacted and congested and sticky intestines. So I know it has some good effects on blood sugar and weight loss for some people, and they're using it for short-term things. But in the long term, we see that, and we see where balance needs to happen. So I guess when we're talking about also fruits that are hybridized, they're out of balance with the natural world because we're not eating crab apples anymore, that it would need to be balanced with vegetables. And I actually design a whole list of recipes and something that we use for our clients called the Vitality Broom Cleanse, where we have them make fruit smoothies blended with celery and spinach and lettuce and different vegetables. We don't just give people fresh, straight concentrated fruit smoothies for this cleanse. So Sam, for self-experimentation for myself, um, with my diet being 50% fruit, sometimes more, something like that, if I wanted to see what effect my fructose consumption was having on me, what tests would I have done? I mean, cholesterol obviously I can have done, and I have had done. I have it every time I go, and it's usually perfect. But what else would I look at? Would I look at CRP?
Yeah. There's a couple. I have probably 100 cases of young children with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, strictly from drinking high sugar sodas. We take the sodas out, and their liver begins to heal. Sugar and alcohol are processed exactly the same way in the pancreas. That's a known fact. The chemistry is very well understood. So giving a child 3 sugar sodas a day does the same liver damage as if you gave that child 3 beers a day. Does the exact same liver damage. So when you look at blood work, you want to look at AST, ALT. You want to look at your metabolic panels.
Okay, I'm going to run some tests. I'm going to do some self-experimentation, and I would love to talk to you about them at some point. I'm just so curious because, because I hear what you're saying, and I look at my own diet, and I eat a lot of hybridized modern fruits and things like that, and I'm aware that I'm doing it. I have an intelligence around food. I've worked with food for decades now, and I know a lot of the foods that we eat don't appear in nature, including carrots and all these types of things, and uh, I see positive benefit in my life unless there's some hidden danger going on. I see clear skin. I think I look young for my age. I have energy.
No, you may be able to offset it. Sure. Yeah. But watch your cholesterol, watch your triglyceride levels, your AST, ALT numbers. If you went completely off of fruit now, you would definitely see an improvement because you're obviously at a point where your oxidative status, your oxidative disease state is very low, Michael. So you're probably exercising, you're eating a lot of vegetables, and trying to be as stress free as you possibly can. Um, those are the things that's typically going to add to it. Now, if we got exposed to Roundup or glyphosates or some other chemicals that would create an inflammatory response, then you would have to up what that is. If you chronically create an oxidative stress condition, then, and it can come from heavy metals. It's not the virus, for example, or the heavy metals that kills anyone. It's the inflammatory response to those that causes disease.
Let me move us over to this because I have a few quick fire questions from the community, but I want to ask you about this because I have a client whose husband, I believe he's in his 30s. We had the conversation um, a long time ago, so I don't remember all of the details, but she said something to me. I believe he has pancreatic cancer, and he's a young man. And of course, the news was devastating to them. And she follows me on social media, and we message a bit. And she said, "Well, you know, my husband can't take astaxanthin." And I said, "Why not?" And she said, "Well, because of these research studies that have come out." And I sent a copy of it over to you. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it, but I'm going to give everyone a little bit of a background. I'm just going to read the title of it so the listeners can understand what we're about to talk about. It's a National Cancer Institute article that references like 3 or 4 studies. And the name of the article, the title is Antioxidants Accelerate the Growth and Invasiveness of Tumors in Mice. And basically, what the underlying idea of the article is, and I'll post it in the show notes so people can take a look at it, is that the presence of high levels of antioxidants, and by the way, in these studies, they were using NAC and vitamin E as the antioxidants. But what it does is it sort of creates a condition in the body of having a, neutralizing free radicals, and it creates a condition that sort of suppresses the body's own innate tumor suppression functions because it doesn't have that stress. It almost has like, it almost suggests that the stress of free radicals creates a hormetic experience that will stimulate gene P53, which is a tumor suppressor gene. And when you take that stimulus away, by introducing antioxidants, that the body's own innate tumor suppression doesn't work.
First of all, the title gave it away very, very quickly. And also, from a 35,000 foot level, this article was paid for by Amgen and Pfizer. Their whole objective is to eliminate antioxidants to stop and get out of the pharmaceutical world. Antioxidants stop disease. Now, the title of that is Antioxidants Accelerate the Growth and Invasiveness of Tumors in Mice. They used vitamin E, alpha tocopherol, in that study. That's not representative of antioxidants at all. But the whole concept is in the title. They classified because alpha tocopherol is metabolized differently than the other tocopherols. They said all antioxidants have the same effect. Well, they don't. And the report doesn't share that at all. As a matter of fact, I have right now 27 NIH reports offsetting the conclusions in this report. So it's a complete bogus report funded by two pharmaceutical companies, Amgen and Pfizer, to create and keep you in a disease state, relying on pharmaceuticals. Antioxidants stop disease. The more vegetables you eat, the lower your incidence of cancer. What's in the vegetables that you eat? They're antioxidants. The colorful yellows, reds, greens, the xanthophiles. This article, I had to chuckle when I read it. You can't take it seriously. When they looked down at the tocopherols, alpha tocopherol, as a matter of fact, I don't even recommend vitamin E as a supplement. But it does have some membrane protection properties, the fatty acids that's in some of the vitamin E's. But the alpha tocopherol really has no bearing, as it's totally inconclusive whether it has any effect either way on this. It was a bad study. But the entire thrust of this is in the title, antioxidants. And yet they only did the study with vitamin E, which we know is not a very good, actually it's a pro-oxidant. When it's vitamin E, vitamin A, yeah, vitamin D, are all processed in the liver, they create an inflammatory response.
So would you recommend not taking a vitamin D supplement?
Oh no, I recommend vitamin D because vitamin D is an essential vitamin that we have to have. Vitamin E is not one of those, and we get plenty of vitamin E in the food we eat. Vitamin E is not one that I recommend to anyone. Um, so they picked the worst case where they knew there would never be a positive result from it because vitamin E doesn't behave like that. And they end up completely inflating it to encompass all antioxidants. That should be a light that goes off when you read these papers.
Blanket term of antioxidants when they've really only used two substances. Also, studies not done in humans, but studies done in mice. And it's interesting that you say that it's designed to keep people inflamed because do you remember what the conclusion was? The conclusion was that they may even be able to treat patients with pro-oxidants. So they think that they're going to somehow hormetically stimulate people's own innate antioxidant tumor suppression by introducing oxidants into the system.
The single largest oxidants prescribed by pharmaceutical companies are chemotherapy. That's what this is about. If they say we can now treat cancer with pro-oxidants, well, that justifies me selling you more chemotherapy. Chemotherapy and radiation generate inflammation. The inflammation is supposed to target the cancer cell. It's supposed to be so overwhelming that it kills or mutates the cancer cell so severely. But there's three mechanisms to repair DNA that's been damaged: PARP, BRCA1, and BRCA2. In normal cells, we have all three repair mechanisms. In cancer cells, you only have one, and that's called PARP. So if you're BRCA1, BRCA2 negative, you have a real problem because they'll give you a PARP inhibitor and give you chemotherapy. And if you don't have BRCA1, BRCA2 DNA repair, that's one of the most virulent forms of cancer because when they give you chemo, it's going to kill the cancer cell and it's going to kill or mutate a normal cell, and you're going to get cancer again in 3 to 5 years or sooner. That's why triple negative cancers, there's no BRCA1, no BRCA2, and no PARP. That is a difficult cancer to get under control using chemo or radiation. This is and I run across these frequently, where they try to take a neutral or slightly negative snippet and categorically draw it all the way around a specific program. But the idea is to keep you and to allow and promote pro-inflammatory medicine because that's what pharmaceutical companies are developing. They're developing more chemo cocktails. And if all of a sudden these antioxidants stop cancer, they're out billions. So you're going to see more of this type of thing in the National Cancer Institute. And in some cases, I see it in the NIH, but there's several papers right now in the NIH completely offsetting this. This was written in 2015, and the NIH has several papers that I can send you to from 2016 to 2020, completely debunking this this paper.
Well, you see it epidemiologically as well. I mean, you see people that are eating antioxidants and vegetables and all these things. I mean, you see lower incidences of cancer in these communities. I mean, it was very, it's a real brain twister when you read that headline, because you go, how could that be? How could all of this other data just, what about all this other data? How could it be so wrong then?
This is the one they want to promote because it keeps their business alive, and it pushes the whole concept of prevention of disease. Antioxidants prevent you from getting a disease. Pharmacological companies, pharmaceutical companies hate that concept. Don't tell me you're going to prevent a disease, because my whole basis is on treating disease. My whole existence is on treating disease. And if there's no more any more disease, I'm out of business.
Speaking of, I wanted to ask you this. A number of years ago, maybe in early 2000, 2002 or so, in the holistic health community, the consumption of and the IV introduction of food grade hydrogen peroxide was very popular. Still might be. I don't know. I think naturopaths still do it, but people were drinking it and diluting it. Is now, from your perspective, and the idea behind it, by the way, was that it was going to kill different microforms in the blood and release oxygen up into the tissue and all these things. Is that just complete insanity to you?
It's insanity. They have a fundamental, complete collapse of chemistry. Hydrogen peroxide forms a free radical. You can actually have two hydroxyl free radicals depending on how the electrons split. You can also get into what's called superoxide, where HOOH, which is hydrogen peroxide, reacts spontaneously into H2O, but the H2O, which is water, has to donate an electron to that other oxygen. And that's called superoxide. It is one of the most deadly free radicals. It reacts almost instantaneously within just a few milliseconds. If there's a protein there, you've just misfolded that protein. Now, if you have 100 million molecules, let me give you an example. In water, 18 grams, which is a half a shot glass, has 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd molecules. That's 23 zeros. How many molecules is in half a shot glass of water? Hydrogen peroxide, when you drink a half a shot glass of hydrogen peroxide, it has the same number of free radicals that it generates, 6 times 10 to the 23rd. These are highly reactive guided missiles, and you are not going to have enough glutathione to offset it. It's a great disinfectant because it destroys bacterial cells from the same oxidative stress that it does normal cells in your body. That's why if you have a wound that's healing, don't put hydrogen peroxide on it. It's going to destroy the new cells of the wound healing. Put something just to keep the bacteria off, like neosporin or something like that. But don't add, if it's a fresh wound and I cut my skin, I'll put hydrogen peroxide on it because I want to kill the bacteria that's there. Now I'm going to kill some cells, but they've already been damaged from the wound. As the wound begins to heal, don't use hydrogen peroxide.
My wife is giving me, if she's listening to this right now, I'm going to really catch an earful because, look, I was born in the 70s. I grew up in the 80s. Like, we put peroxide on everything. And I'll still have a bottle around. And she's worked in emergency medicine and stuff. And she's like, why do you have that? She's like, you're just making things worse. Do not put that on anything.
She's right. It works fine on the initial wound. Gargling with it will kill bacteria in your mouth, even the good bacteria. So you'll see it start to fizz up around your gums and all around. That's the free radicals being released in the superoxide state. It's like ozone. It is a disinfectant. You don't want to do that very often because there's some bacteria in your mouth that you want to retain. And gargling with peroxide will kill them all, and you may end up with another yeast infection. Once the bacteria goes away, the yeast and the fungus will start to move in very, very, very quickly. Yeast and funguses recover faster than bacteria do. They grow faster.
We see that after heavy antibiotic use. People, if their diet's not right and they upset that microbiome, what moves in after that can sometimes take a while to rebalance. Yeah. Okay, we've been on for a long time. I want to ask you a few quick fire questions if you have some time.
Yep, I do.
These should be quick. These are just a few of them that I pulled out of the comments on social media. One person wants to know if Valasta interferes with any meds or supplements. Are there any contraindications with different supplements or medications that we need to be concerned about?
Nothing directly. And by that, what I mean is when people are taking a medication, let's say, for example, they're a type 2 diabetic and they're taking insulin, just to make it easy. Not many people take insulin anymore, um, but but you take something to keep your sugar levels in line. When you begin to take Valasta and you notice your sugar levels, they'll start to drop. And everybody thinks, well, that's an interaction with the Valasta with my insulin injections. No, what that is it's stopping the misfolding, the insulin resistance. And you don't give insulin to people who have normal blood sugars. That will drop your blood sugars even low. So you should be cutting out the insulin as your blood levels begin to stabilize and normalize. The same thing happens with warfarin and heparin. We see the SAD rates and typically the SAD rates will change if you're on warfarin for blood clots and all of a sudden your blood gets thinner. If you're taking Valasta, blood will get thinner, your SAD rates will improve, and people say, oh my golly, it's reacting with my warfarin. No, it isn't. It's fixing the adhesive properties caused by those free radicals, the electrostatic adhesion of those white blood cells or platelets. And what will happen is um, they'll normalize, and you don't give warfarin or heparin to people who have normal blood. So you have to get off of those medications. It's not a direct interaction of the Valasta with the medication. It's the effect. You should be off of, get yourself off of warfarin as quickly as possible, because you're becoming normal. That was the same thing I noticed with the polycythemia that I had, was my hemoglobin began to normalize. I no longer needed phlebotomies. That was my medication, was the phlebotomies. Um, my blood normalized. So I didn't have to go get phlebotomized anymore. And it's the same thing. These are going to improve. Your entire blood work's going to improve, and the need for these medications is going to go away. Now, if people want to call that a side effect or contraindication or whatever, but we're just trying to make you normal and get you off of those medications.
Dr. Bishy and myself have had the same observations where people will be following the lifestyle and the diet, and all of a sudden their medications are too strong for them, and they need to adjust them. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
That's exactly right. And Fred and I have spoken about it too. Uh, Yours and Fred's protocol is outstanding on being able to normalize. We're only made up of mass and energy. For example, in the warfarin example, you want to change the electrostatic properties of your platelets so that they don't stick together like static electricity and form blood clots and hang up in capillaries. Um, the way you do that is with diet. If you have to resort to medication and you haven't solved the problem, you're just going to keep using more and more medication. Um, Diet is the key. And as long as you can manage that inflammatory response, eat whatever you want in moderation. But if you get out of whack, you'll see it in that HSCRP number will start to ink up. I'm at the same level. I'm 72 years old now, and I like to have a glass of wine periodically with my wife sitting out looking out over the back porch. Well, I'll look at my HSCRP, and if it's pushing 2.6, 2.7, 2.8, I'll forego that glass of wine.
So how, are you testing your own CRP? Like how are you having this done before you decide to have a drink?
Oh no, no, the CRP doesn't change that dramatically. I do it once a month, so mine fluctuates from zero point 0.9 to about 2.6, and I just sort of live my life going from guardrail to guardrail with it.
And it's really over 3 that we start to become concerned, right?
Yeah, I don't want anything over 3. You get over 5, your risk of disease goes up pretty dramatically. Um, but I want to keep it less than 3. I want to be on the low end of that distribution curve based on my history. I don't want to go back to where I was.
I have to have mine done because I've been doing something that's been causing me a lot of stress recently. And so I'm stressed and I'm eating a diet that's 50 or plus percent calories and fructose. I want to see where I'm at. I want to either be, I want to be surprised in either direction.
Everyone should get their HSCRP run at least twice a year.
Let me move us on to the next question. And I know you do this in a very controlled environment, but do you test Velasta for heavy metals or different contamination?
There's two processes. First of all, our raw materials supplier have to provide us a complete specification, certified, and then what we do is we'll pull the product and we'll spot check to make sure it's within those specifications.
There's a new trend, and I think it's because there's just so much data and so much information sharing, but particularly in the holistic health community where people are very concerned about these things, where people are doing all their own testing and then they're talking about it. So, we see things like in some of the different sea salts, they're finding heavy metals, they're finding contaminants in chocolate. I think was it thallium or I know there was lead and I think it was thallium or I think it was one of the two, but they're finding these things, and people are getting very concerned about sort of micro analyzing all the different health products they take. So it's doesn't surprise me that that question came up. And this will be the last question. Someone asked, is Velasta safe for hormonal cancers like ovarian cancers?
Yeah, it is. One of the papers that I wrote, we had it wrong. Estrogen does not cause cancer. Um, if that's the case, then every 16-year-old girl would be having cancer problems. So estrogen, and the first thing a doctor wants to do is, if there's ovarian cancer, is put on estrogen inhibitors. Try to get the estrogen levels down. What causes those cancers is estradiol. Estradiol is a chemical that's produced from estrogen plus the hydroxyl free radical. They react together and they form estradiol. Estradiol is a carcinogen. So, as the stress level of the woman increases with age, or if her oxidative disease state increases, what doctors want to do is they want to exclude the estrogen part of the reactant side of the equation. The stress level is still there. You can never get estrogen to 0 in women. I don't care how many drugs you give them, it's always going to be produced. So there's always that risk. As long as the hydroxyl free radical is there, it's going to react with it. We see the same thing with testosterone and dihydroxy testosterone that causes hair loss. Now, our point is, if I reduce the hydroxyl free radical, I don't produce estradiol, And the woman can still produce estrogen without estrogen inhibitors, and she lives a happy life. Estrogen does not cause cancer, and any doctor that admits that, you go to another doctor. You should know this. Estradiol, which is the reaction of estrogen with a hydroxyl free radical, causes cancer. Reduce your oxidative disease state, and you don't have to worry about it.
Well, thank you so much, Sam. Let's end on that. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to order my next bottle of Vasta because I know I've been stressed. I'm going to have my CRP done first, and I don't want to mess with the data that I might get because I ran out a little while ago and I haven't ordered yet. So this is a perfect opportunity to collect some data because it's been, I don't know, a month or two.
That's right. I can see a research paper.
And on that, Sam, thank you so much. I feel blessed to know you. I appreciate all your knowledge. This was a great podcast, and I would love to do it again because I'm sure more questions will come in and there'll be new developments.
Anytime, Michael. Anytime. Thank you.